Are recording. So welcome everyone who has joined us today. I am going to in just a minute be quiet, and we're going to let Alexa, who is the library's scholarly communications librarian, which means she deals with things like publishing, she deals with things like she deals with copyright issues, things like that. She's sort of our go-to person for that. She is going to give us a nice presentation about open access, which I won't get into because I know she defines it. But if anyone has questions, it seems silly for me to talk about it. If anyone has questions, you can feel free to either put them in the chat or hang out at the end, and she'll be able to address those with us. So take it away, Alexa. Let me give you the ball first.
Thank you.
I meant to do that like when you first entered about 15 minutes ago, but better late than never.
No worries. It's all good. Yep, we got it.
Right.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Hello, everybody. As Emily mentioned, my name is Alexa. I am the scholarly communication librarian, and she defined it very well, so I'm not going to go over that again. So today we're talking about open access, and I chose the orange bowl because open access, I'm not really sure why, but the open access movement is often associated with the color orange. I don't know where that started. Maybe it's because it's October and pumpkins, but I also have a slide that references the fruits of knowledge, so I thought it was appropriate. So today we are talking about what is open access? Why is it important? What does it have to do with libraries and universities? And in talking about this, we're going to talk about how do you know if you can trust an open access source, because that is one of the many ways in which open access can be confusing and frustrating. Are open access sources trustworthy? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how the library supports open access in various ways. So we have an open repository. This is the second year of our open access publication fund. The library is in support of authors retaining their copyright, and again, vetting open access publication. So how can we tell if an open access publication is something you want to publish in or read, things like that. And then we'll talk about how you can look for open access resources by discipline. So I should be able to wrap up with time for questions at the end. But as Emily said, if you want to put questions in the chat, I don't have the chat open because I don't want another box blocking my screen, but Emily can yell at me when and if there are questions. So the first question, what is open access and why is it important? So because I'm a librarian, I'm looking at it from the library's perspective. And so we talk about this thing called the serial crisis, which began in the 80s. The graph on the left is from the Association of Research Libraries, and it shows serials versus monograph costs between 1986 and 2011. So it is a little bit outdated, but it definitely demonstrates the issue that we were having in libraries, where of those 25 years, buying books, the cost only went up 100%, which is a lot, but the cost of buying journals or serials went up 400%. And you might think, well, that's kind of crazy because during those 25 years, the internet became, we can't live without the internet. So, and the internet made things faster and cheaper and easier. So how come it costs so much more money to subscribe to journals or get access to journal articles? And you might also notice that on this graph, we do have the recession of 2008, 2009, that time, and the serial costs did dip a tiny bit and then shot right back up again. So we are talking about this first in terms of libraries from a financial perspective, and that's kind of the root of how libraries got involved with this. But we are going to talk about how open access as a whole goes beyond cost. So before the internet, we traditionally had, you had to pay for journals and get them shipped to your library. So you had either a subscription that you purchased directly from the publisher, and you might subscribe for a year or for a few years and then renew your subscriptions, or you might use a subscription agency, so that middle person. I'm saying you, I mean libraries. And so now with the internet, we have digital subscriptions. So there are a couple of different models. One is you might purchase, again, you own that digital copy, those digital copies. So even if you stop subscribing to future content, you still own those back copies. Or you license materials. So it's kind of like Netflix. As long as you're paying for it, you have access to it. As soon as you stop paying for it, you lose access to those journal articles. One big problem with this is that publishers would, or aggregators like EBSCO would put together these big deals, which is where they said, hey, because of your institution and the disciplines you have, this is a great package for you. These are the journal titles you should have. And it's something similar that we're giving to another institution similar to what you all are doing. The problem with that is that you couldn't choose the journals you didn't really want, the fluff that wasn't very important. You would be paying for that anyway. Also, if you wanted a particular journal that wasn't in this big deal subscription package, you would have to pay additional costs for subset collections. So the question is, traditionally, in order to access information, and today we're particularly talking about journal articles, but books can be included in this as well. You would pay to read. You would subscribe to a journal and you would pay to read. Is this model sustainable? Yes, no, or maybe is kind of the big question. In my opinion, if you look at serial expenditures, it went up 400% in 25 years, and our budgets are not going up 25% or 400% in 25 years. Obviously, this year is an anomaly for other reasons, but I mentioned the 2008-2009 recession before, and our budgets at institutions and libraries across the country were significantly cut. So as prices to access journals go up, we're having to scrimp in other areas. So we might be losing journals that are really important to our researchers and to our areas of study, or we might be losing staff or other places. And obviously with the internet, a lot of things were streamlined and we could get rid of some subscriptions, but it didn't balance out. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I do apologize for the wall of text. I know this is not good practice for PowerPoints, but I do want to just give you the context of the original movement for open access. So with the advent of the internet, researchers, scientists, and some publishers said, hey, with the internet, traditionally scientists and scholars have published the fruits of their research without payment. Basically, I mean, now Emily and I were talking about this before you all joined us. Obviously, there are rewards for publishing, and those are tied into prestige and reputation and getting hired and getting promotion and tenure for faculty and researchers and getting grant money to further your research. But before all of that system, our scholars and scientists have been publishing since, you know, the middle, I think like the 1500s was the first journal was published. And obviously you weren't publishing for tenure at that point. They were publishing to further the scholarly conversation. And build upon their research. So with the internet, they thought, hey, we could actually distribute peer-reviewed literature free and unrestricted. So as long as you have access to the internet, which has its own problems, I'm not going to ignore that, but you do remove a lot of barriers to access literature, academic scholarly literature. Because as I've said, the library is paying for all of this. So if you're not associated as a student or a faculty or a researcher with a library or university or a research center, if you've ever come across as an independent researcher or as a student, you might have found an article and it asks you to pay $40. Well, we have in the institution, we have interlibrary loan, or you might just not be logged in or whatever, but individual people who might have, you know, a sick loved one or might be doing, you know, their own COVID research, they might not have access to a library with vast resources. So the idea of the open access movement, the original idea, was to make things freely available on the public internet. So anyone could read, download, copy, distribute, print, search, or link the full text so that they could do their own researching, and we could have a faster, continue the conversation faster and remove financial, legal, and technical barriers. And I'm going to talk more about the legal in terms of copyright in a little bit. And then again, I said this started out with money, but it's about money, but it's also about giving authors who are publishing for free. But when they do that, they're often giving their copyright to the publishers. So open access kind of recenters the conversation and says, yeah, we want to publish and we want to make our work available, but we also want to retain our rights, or we want a say in how people can reuse our work, rather than signing off your copyright when you publish with a journal. Okay, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty of open access. And like I said at the beginning, or if I didn't, I'm sorry, but open access can be confusing and frustrating, and for good reason, because there are a lot of ins and outs of open access and the different models and the different ways something could be considered open access. So on the left here, we're talking about the ways in which an article can be considered open access. So the gold model is where an article is published in a journal and it is made freely available as soon as it's published, because somebody, either the author or somebody on behalf of the author, has paid what is called an article processing charge or an article publishing charge. Green is also sometimes referred to as self-archiving, and this is where an article is put into an open repository, like the TAMU-CC. We have our own repository, or it could be put into another open repository that's subject specific, like archive spelled with an X or bioarchive spelled with an X. But sometimes these are not made publicly available right away as soon as the article is published. There might be what's called an embargo, where the publisher says you can make your work freely available to read, but only after a certain amount of time. And then on the right, we also have, they might say, you can't put the version of record or that final published version with all of the, copy editing and all of the pretty fluffy stuff into the repository. You can put some other version. And this gets very complicated because each publisher and sometimes individual journals will have their own policies of what version you can put in the repository. So I'll talk about how to find those policies in a little bit. And then we have bronze. So bronze is the third way an article could be made open access. And COVID-19, I know we're all sick of using it as an example for things, but it really is a good example of where publishers, either by policy or practice, will make something freely available, and it could be temporary or continuous. So back in the spring, when the entire world practically shut down, a lot of publishers, some like academic textbook publishers, said we're going to make our content freely available via the internet until May or June or August, so that students who, because we interrupted the semester, students were able to hopefully finish the semester because those items that they might have had to use interlibrary loan or go physically to a library to use were made available. On the research side, a lot of publishers have said that they are going to make anything related to COVID-19 or SARS publicly available through the pandemic. So this is where I have an issue with the bronze model, is that, well, how long do we know? What is your definition as the publisher? What is their definition of the duration of the pandemic? Is it until we have, studied vaccines that are approved and are available to everyone? Is it until you decide it's no longer financially feasible for the publisher? So that's one of the issues with bronze, but it is one of the models. So again, on the right, I did mention version of record and some other version, like a preprint. So before, in some areas of study, a lot of authors will deposit a preprint of their work, which means it hasn't been peer reviewed yet. It hasn't gone through, the copy editing. It hasn't been published at all. It's, I'm finished. This is my manuscript that I'm submitting to journals, but I want the information to be publicly available as soon as possible. And there are preprint repository or archives that do have a screening process for preprints. So it's not just like the rest of the internet where you put anything up and anyone can read it and they have to decide for themselves if it's sound science or sound information or not. Okay, so I talked about the different ways that articles can be made open access, but now we have to talk about the two differences between open access. So I've talked a lot about free, meaning free of charge, which is gratis open access. So that's where an article or a book chapter is made free of charge, so you can download it without having to pay for it or access it, but it still retains traditional copyright and licensing restrictions. So for academics and scholars, this isn't necessarily a big issue for us because we have the fair use exemptions in US copyright law, as well as the TEACH Act, where we can use traditionally copyrighted works in more ways than the Copyright Act says we can because of these exemptions. What Libra Open Access does is it makes the information free of charge, but it also frees up the copyright and licensing restrictions so that people can reuse their work in ways that you can't do traditionally. So you could take a part of a work and redistribute it rather than one copy for me. I can download that, but I can't, I can't sell it or make money off of it in some way. And so we'll talk a bit more about the differences between publishers who offer open access publication, but for the most part, for a lot of journals, if they say they offer open access publishing as an option that you can choose, it's usually gratis open access, and you're still signing away your copyright when you publish with them, or most of it. So almost all journals offer at least one, if not more, of these options. But it gets confusing again, because it's like, which option can I choose? So that's at the article level. So now we have open access at the journal level, so the entire journal. One is considered a hybrid, and this is where it was a traditional subscription journal, and they now have an option for gold articles funded by an APC or some other kind of payment. So that would be a traditional journal that the library is subscribing to, but when you publish your work, they say, okay, well, you can make your work open access as soon as it's published if you pay us a certain amount of money. This has become an option for traditional journals because a lot of grant funders have said that, okay, we're giving you money to do research, but when you publish your research, we want it publicly available as soon as it's published. So a lot of authors, understandably so, because they want grant money, but they also want to publish in certain journals for, it's a great journal for their research, or it's prestigious, or they need it for tenure promotion. They didn't like that lockdown of I now can't publish in the journal of my choice because of the funder. So traditional subscription journals have offered this as a way that you can still publish in their journal, but they are still taking money from libraries and other subscribers for everything else that isn't published open access or doesn't have an APC. So that's a hybrid model. A gold model is where everything in that journal is published open access immediately upon publication. So as soon as that issue is published, everything, as long as I have the internet, I can find it and I can read it. So this model is typically funded by APC. So every single article that is published using an APC, or an article processing charge. So whereas the traditional subscription model is considered pay to read because you subscribe and you're paying money to then read your content, this model is considered pay to publish. So the author is paying money to publish. Obviously, there is a lot of consternation with this model because a lot of times faculty are publishing and they're not getting money for it. So how come they are being asked to then fund these, pay for their work to be published? That doesn't seem right. It's an understandable argument. However, if the author pays an understandable APC, which there are some journals like hybrid journals who charge outrageous amounts of money to publish one article. If every author pays, then the rest of the world doesn't have to pay to read your work. And if you are using grant money, why not pay? Why not publish and so that everyone can read your work, not just those who have access through library subscriptions? And we'll go into more detail later. And then the third model for journals is platinum or diamond. And this is where the articles are all gold, meaning that as soon as they're published, they are made freely available. But there are no APC charges for the authors. So this is a model in which an institution or a sponsor funds that journal. So, for example, I am a member of ALA, American Library Association, and I'm also a member of their subset association, the American College and Research Libraries. They have a journal that comes out once a month called College and Research Library News. I don't pay for that journal, but I get that journal every month mailed to my house because I am a member. I don't have to be a member to read it, but that's how they are funding that journal, is through membership. So, and my membership money is also going towards scholarships for conferences and other things, but part of my membership dues are going towards funding this journal. Alternatively, TAMU-CC offers open access journals. So if you, as a student or faculty, want to start an open access journal and you want it hosted through, we have a partnership with Texas Digital Libraries. We, as TAMU-CC, are paying TDL to help host these journals. And so you can create an open access journal that's hosted through TAMU-CC and TDL. And you can choose whether they have to be open access journals, but you can choose if you want to hire copy editors, you can choose to have APCs for your articles, or you can, do all the work as part of, your reputation or your service. But in a way, TAMU-CC is funding that open access journal. Okay, so this is kind of going back over some of the things that I've already mentioned, why open access has become such a big movement. So like I mentioned, money, it's been very difficult to keep up with subscription costs over the years. But some institutions like Harvard and University of Illinois, and I'm not going to say where they are because I said it wrong last time, but they have their own, sorry, my dog's barking. They have their own policies which say if you're a faculty member, you have to publish your work open access at some point in some form. So they're not saying absolutely everything must be published in a fully open access venue. They're saying if you do publish in a hybrid journal or a traditional journal, you either pay the APC or you publish in a green open access way. So either use their repository or another open access repository. There are also governmental mandates and policies, and like I mentioned before, funders. So either government funders or individual like Wellcome Trust and Gates Foundation. And then, like I mentioned, the Association of College and Research Libraries. There are also movements within academic communities, publishing communities, and libraries to further open access. So there are movements like OA 2020, the 2.5% initiative, and I don't have time to go into all of these, but it's not just one librarian at one library saying open access is cool and we should all do it. There are these global networks of sharing and networking. Spark, Journal Negotiation Community of Practice is a really big one. Force 11 conference as well. You may have heard, and I referenced this at the very end of my presentation, TAMU-CC, as part of the A&M system, has joined the Texas Library Coalition for United Action, which, to start with, is negotiating with Elsevier, which is the largest scholarly publisher in the world, for a better deal, essentially. And I'll talk about that at the end. But TAMU-CC is a part of one of these communities of practice, essentially. Okay, so like I mentioned, how do you know if you can trust an open access journal? Some of these are the same as how do you know if you can trust a non-open access journal, in terms of, is it peer reviewed? Can you find it in a database that you trust? So the Directory of Open Access Journals, or the DOAJ, is my favorite, and we're going to go a little bit in depth into that in a little bit. But if it's indexed there, and as this says, indexed after March 2014, that means it's reputable, and we'll see why when we go into the DOAJ. There are also trusted indices, that do index open access journals such as Web of Knowledge, Ulrichs, and Sociological Abstracts. You can also look if the publisher is a member of a reputable industry organization, and then you can do what you do with other journals, which is look at the publication affiliation. So are they affiliated with a university or professional organization? Like I mentioned, TAMU-CC hosts an open access journal. Does the editorial board have credentials? Are they either scholars in the area, or are they practitioners? Like, are they a practicing nurse for a nursing journal? Look at things like acceptance rates. So if they have an 100% acceptance rate, they probably want your money. They're not actually looking at the value of what you're trying to publish. But if you have questions or hesitations, contact the editorial board, contact a librarian to help you determine whether it's a good publication. Another thing that should be very clear, if you don't remember anything else from this slide, DOAJ and article publishing costs. So it's sometimes called processing charges, and sometimes it's called a publishing cost. You should think of it as a publishing cost, because you should never have to pay to submit your article to a journal. The only time you would pay for an open access gold article publication is after they've accepted your journal, and then your article, excuse me, and they've gone through, you've gone through peer review, and they said, okay, now here's the final copy edited version, here's your invoice, pay the APC. So that's something to note. If there is a submission charge, don't do that. There is a good argument to change this model. I will not go into that today because it's complicated, and a lot of these things are still confusing even to me. But for now, just keep in mind, do not pay money to submit your article to a journal. And then Think, Check, Submit is another great resource as well. All of this can be found on one of our LibGuides, which I will have a link to later in the presentation. To find my mouse. Okay, oh, here it is. So here are the ways in which the library supports open access. So like I mentioned, we have our own open repository. We have it organized by college as well as our research institutions on campus. So Hart Research and Conrad Blucher both have their own, we call them communities and collections. Every student who writes a thesis or dissertation, their work ends up in our repository as well. And this year we are trying to expand it to get some undergrad student work in there as well. But it's a great place for green open access or self-archiving. So if you have an article that you want to publish in a journal, but it's considered a hybrid journal, you could put a version of your work in the repository. Also, if you've published something in the past and you aren't sure if it's publicly available or can you do that, I have down here under author's rights, if you want to self-archive your work, Sherpa Romeo is a great database which tells you based on a journal and based on a publisher when you can self-archive your work or publish it OA. So if there's a 1-year embargo, 3-year embargo, something like that, and what version of your work. So they've gone through all of the hassle of going to the publisher's website and searching through their policies, and they have put it together for you. So you can search by journal title, or you can search by ISSN and find out what you can do with your past published work. You can also, in future, like I mentioned, even if you're not publishing in an open access venue, if you're publishing in a traditional subscription journal, there are still ways to negotiate how much copyright you hold on to as the author. And come talk to us. Talk to your librarian, talk to me. There, on this guide here, there are different ways of looking into that. But if you have questions about anything, please always don't hesitate to email me or get in contact with me or your liaison librarian. And like I said, there are other ways. So everything that was on the previous slide about how to find reliable open access publications, you can go to this link. And like I mentioned, you can host your own open access journal here at TAMU-CC. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Open Access Publication Fund, because it is one of the larger ways, not larger ways, but kind of exciting ways that the library and TAMU-CC is supporting open access on campus. So this year, the fiscal year and academic year of 2020-2021, we have $30,000 thanks to the Mary and Jeff Bell Library, the Division of Research and Innovation, and the Office of the Provost. So last year, this was a pilot project. We started with $15,000. We ran out before, I think it was like February or March, and we asked our partners for more funding, and we ended up with an additional $12,000. So a total of $27,000, and we were out before the end of the school year, but I think it was even before May. And we started around this time in October of last year as well. So this year we asked our funding partners if we could start at $30,000. And I really do think it's a testament to, the commitment of these three areas, the library, our provost, and the research and innovation, that we really are committed to furthering open access publication. As a state institution, we believe, at least in the library, and I think others on campus believe this too, tax dollars from Texas citizens are going towards some of the publications that are, the research and publications that are happening on campus. So why wouldn't we make it openly available to our taxpayers? And same goes for students. They have access to all this wonderful research while they're students, but as soon as they graduate, we cut them, not as soon as they graduate, but pretty quickly after they graduate, we cut them off because our deal with the publishers is we're paying for current full-time students, and we can't afford to pay for all of our alumni. I do believe there are certain institutions who at least allow some access to some content for their alums. I really apologize if you can hear my dog barking. So our Open Access Publication Fund application, we do have policies. There's kind of a lot, but really we're looking at TAMU-CC, full-time faculty or researchers. The work must be peer-reviewed. To apply, the work must be accepted for publication. And I understand that timeline is kind of tricky and it's a balancing act. But please, again, email me or get in contact with me or your librarian if you have questions about any of this. The work cannot be subject to an embargo, so it has to be fully open access upon publication. The publication venue must provide peer review for the works. And obviously the funds that we are giving to our authors are for article processing charges. We do have a cap, and this gets kind of complicated. So again, check out the website, but essentially hybrid journals, because a lot of times grant funders are paying. Hybrid journals will ask for obscene amounts of money. In my opinion, it's like $5,000 is not uncommon. But fully open access venues, although those charges are going up year to year, sometimes for good reasons, we do have a $3,000 per work cap. So if it's a journal article or a book chapter, the library thanks to our funders, will provide up to $3,000. But again, all of this information is on the website. And basically, if you don't have grant money, we are willing to help you with the costs. But if you do have grant money or other ways of funding, you should go there first. And all of the works will be added to the TAMU-CC repository. Because it's open access, it can be put into our repository, and we are just asking, since we're paying for it, we'd like a copy of your work, please. And then publication eligibility. So here's something, this is, I think, like 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10. If somebody applied last year, if I had to say no, it was because they were not asking to publish in a fully open access venue. So they were publishing in one of those traditionally subscription-based journals that said, if you give us a bunch of money, we'll make your particular article open access at the time of publication. So hybrid journals, we do not support. And again, this is because it's considered double dipping. The library is probably paying for a subscription to that journal, and then we're also giving you money to make it freely available. Of course, this is for everyone, not just us, but unfortunately, the library doesn't have that kind of budget. Like I said, we ran out of $15,000 in like February or March, and then we ran out of the additional $12,000 before the end of May. So we anticipate $30,000 to go quickly, and we are hoping to support fully open access venues. So kind of not just supporting open access in theory in your particular work, but in the publication venue of your choice. Okay, so if you have any questions about the OA fund, please check out the website, or ask us questions. But real quick, I went through this a lot faster than I thought I would. We are going to take a look at the DOAJ, or the Directory of Open Access Journals. So like I said, you can probably trust a publication that is indexed in the DOAJ, but if you're wondering, how do I find journals in my discipline area, you do have this option of browsing subjects, and it's not the greatest interface. It's okay. The way they organize subjects is kind of interesting, but let's say if I'm looking at, political science, you have to click on the arrow over here. If you click on what you're looking at, it will tell you in political science there are 39,000 records for this subject. This includes individual articles as well as journals. So there aren't 39,000 journals related to political science. But you can see that it breaks it down a little bit more. Not super well, but if I'm looking at international relations, I can see that there are 21,000 records for this, and I can view journals or articles. And I see over here that there are, 21,000 records, but 110 journals. And I can look, so once you're here, you can look a little bit more by discipline or subject area. And you do have some information, so you can filter a little bit more on the left, but all the information you need will be available. So I'm going to look at full text language because I cannot read in any language other than English. Depending on your area of study, you might be able to read or publish in another language. But so open access journals are international. So you have some of the information here. You have the title, the ISSN, their website, the peer review information. So this journal is peer reviewed. This journal here is blind peer reviewed. And you have these green check marks, which means that it's been accepted after March of 2014. So they got a little more stringent after 2014. There is also the DOAJ seal means that they are like the gold standard for open access publications. So 5 of these journals have the gold seal. And yeah, so once I decide, okay, so let's just look at this because this offers a little bit more information. So I see that everything that's published in their journal is published under the CC BY license. If you click on this, it will take you to the Creative Commons website where you can learn more about Creative Commons licensing if you aren't familiar with that. That is a whole nother complex copyright open access issue that I probably could do a whole nother workshop on. But if you have questions, you can go to their website. We do have some information on our LibGuides as well, our research guides. But it basically means that if you publish in this journal, you are giving allowance to anyone to use your work in any way, as long as they are attributing you. So you might have noticed in my presentation, I had an attribution at the bottom of my beginning slides because that presentation or a version of this presentation was done earlier this year, and I really liked the way she formatted it and set it up. And so, she was quoting other people and things like that, but I was, instead of just taking it for my own use, I attributed her work, and under that license, I could do that. So we see the publisher, we see the country of the publisher, date added to the DOAJ, and the last time it was updated. We see here the publication charges. So like I said before, you shouldn't pay to submit your work to a journal. So this says no, so that's good. Article processing charges, or APCs, are 125 euro. I don't know what the exchange rate is right now, but that's not a lot of money, so that's good. We have some Library of Congress subject categories, as well as publishers' keywords. Language of full text is in English. It's PDF. Here we have the editorial information. So like I said, can you trust a publication? Is it peer reviewed? What is the information on the editors? What's the aim and scope? And then obviously, if you do decide you want to publish in a journal, you need to know how you go about doing that. So there are links for all of this information. And then they often provide a time from submission to publication. So that gives you an idea of how quickly you can have your work published. And then you can actually look at articles within the journal itself. I do believe that is everything I had to talk about. I just wanted to say, obviously, if you have questions, I've said this a few times, please contact me or your librarian. I think I saw Emily put a link to finding your librarian if you're unaware. This is Open Access Week. It is an annual global event sponsored by Spark, who I mentioned earlier. And so we are having another event virtually, but for TAMU-CC on Thursday. We are going to have a town hall discussion with our library dean, Kate Radowski, and myself. And so we really encourage you, if you haven't seen the movie Paywall, The Business of Scholarship, please watch it. It's about an hour long. I haven't watched it yet this year, but it's open access. So if you have internet, you can watch it. And it goes really in depth more into the serials crisis that I started talking about, and this issue of the cost of access to information and how the open access movement is a response to that and the issues therein. And like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the TAMU-CC, as part of the A&M system, has joined the Texas Library Coalition for United Action, which, as I mentioned, is a movement, a coalition to negotiate with Elsevier, which is a big publisher, which is talked a bit about in that movie. So if you don't have time to watch the movie but can come to the town hall and you have questions about open access or what's Elsevier, anything like that, please do join us if you are able. So we have 15 minutes left, which is awesome. But if you have any questions, please feel free. Yeah.
First, I have a comment and then a question. So I just want to say I have learned so much in the last 45 minutes. I've been kind of dabbling in individual research into open access, the open access movement, open access resources, and sort of what kind of started this is that I teach an upper division Mexican American women's history course. And in that course, I had the students use the materials from the Wiki Education Foundation for students to create articles in Wikipedia about women. Because but Wikipedia has a lot of problems. We won't even go into those here. We all know it has a lot of problems. And so my goal for that particular course is for students to contribute to that online encyclopedia, because 86% of the biographies that are on it are about men. And so I wanted to kind of challenge that a little bit and have my students produce work that was centered on women, specifically Mexican American women, because the work on just Latinos in general on Wikipedia it's very sad. I don't have a better word for it. So I've been dabbling in some research. I've co-authored a piece with Michael Ramirez. We're trying to get it out there, but it's about Wikipedia. But in the process of us doing that research, there was things popping up about this open access movement, open access resources. And, I know we met briefly at one of the seminar talks, and I knew that our university was kind of a proponent of supporting open access materials, but I just did not know. Wow. I just had no idea the level of commitment and level of support that the institution has for this, for this movement. Essentially, like we're essentially part of it. If I'm not misconstruing anything you said. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for this. It's helped me understand so much more about this movement and how it works. And it's just particularly for folks like Michael and I, we've submitted a piece to a couple of journals. One is a revise and resubmit, but when we thought, well, it would be nice if we could actually publish our work and have it be an open access as part of be an open access resource itself, right? But we just didn't know what the process was. And if institutionally we had any support to be able to make that a reality, So now I know that we do. So I guess my question is, if we were interested in trying to get something published through an open, through like the DOAJ and have it available, what would be the best approach for us to start the process?
That's a really good question. And I like everything you said, and I have thoughts on Wikipedia as well, and I'm sure Emily does too. But in terms of how to go about this process, I would say, take a look at the DOAJ, see if there are journals that might make sense for your work. And you can look at kind of like the scope of different journals. But if you have more particular questions, I'd be happy to, set up a one-on-one or with Michael as well. And we could definitely talk about the different options. One of those, one of the links, and I can go out and find the correct one. Actually, one of our guides has how to deter. I'm sorry, my brain just is done for the day. Apparently, it's 3:50. One of the pages is how to find where to publish your work for open access in particular. So that link might be a good place as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, I think Wikipedia is a great open online resource, but it is definitely very flawed as well. And we know that it is not. It doesn't represent people equally, or information, the different kinds of information equally. Last year,
even the editorship is just problematic. There are very few women that actually. You just look at the gender dynamics, and most of the editors are males.
Yeah,
it's just what? Yeah. So, anyway.
Yes, and it's true with traditional publishing as well. A lot of traditionally published work, the editors and folks on the editorial boards are often men, often white, and a lot of times published works are in English, which is very hard for what is termed the global South, for researchers to get published and recognized, because they might not They might not write in English very well, and so they're getting rejected from these top tier journals. And because publishing in general, academia in general, is so Western centric and English centric, the open access movement really provides more venues for everyone. Go ahead.
Alexa, I think I just dropped a link to the guide you're talking about. That's like how to find the best sort of OA resources for you.
Yes.
I think I dropped that. Awesome. Thank you. And there is a question from How in the chat. How is full-time researcher defined? So can PhD students or PhD candidates, do they count as a full-time researcher?
Unfortunately, right now, they do not. What we've done in the past to work around that policy is if you are a co-author with a full-time faculty who is willing to submit an application for you. I just had one, time is irrelevant. I think it was last week. Our application, the first author is a graduate student, but the graduate student who is working for the university while doing their dissertation work, they're the first author, but it was actually a faculty member who's a co-author who asked if they could apply and did, and we've approved that application. So unfortunately, if it's single authorship, if for graduate students, we just don't have the funds necessarily. It's one of those, like, those were the policies that were decided upon, unfortunately.
Thank you for clearing that up. I do think that's sort of it's like a weird gray area.
It really is a weird gray area, yeah, because we employ our graduate students, so why can't we call them researchers? I don't know. But a lot of times our grad students are co-authoring with our faculty, and we've been able to publish quite a few things for graduate students, including dissertations, because their faculty members are sometimes considered co-authors. So,
I have one last question.
Sure.
Town hall that's happening on Thursday, is there going to be a link sent out, like on email or on Facebook? How can we join that?
I can grab that super quick, I think.
Thank you.
Isn't it fun to have a librarian in librarian presentation?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. We're all just digging up links for each other. Yeah.
Yes. I know where to find that.
Yeah, I don't know if if either of these events were emailed out at all, but we do have them available on our library website. And there are many more. Yes, there's one link, and I think this goes to a different. Yeah, that goes to a different one. But there are, we're doing, TAMU-CC is doing these 2 virtual events. There are virtual events going on all week at other universities and institutions, and that's that first link that Emily shared. I've put a few. This is by no means comprehensive. Some institutions are now doing Opentober, spreading the events out over the month of October, because there really is, as I alluded to in the presentation, there's so many things that are that like go hand in hand with open access, like copyright issues, tenure issues, things like that. So yeah, if you do have time, I know Kate Radowski wanted to join today if she had time, but she will definitely be at that town hall to address any questions. And I'll be there as well.
Yeah. And Kate's fun to listen to about OA because she, like the rest of us, she gets super fired up, and it's very fun to watch, I think.
It really is.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate all the links that you sent. I went ahead and I saved them in my, they're like pinned on my, my taskbar.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Yes.
I'm going to share all of this with Michael as well. So
please do.
Great. And I've also recorded this. So if you would like a recording, anyone who's here today, feel free to email me. I'm sticking my email in the chat. Feel free to email me, and once the recording is done processing, I will send you a link so you can access this. You can share it with your co-authors, or anyone. Spread the word.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for coming.
Have a good day.
Right. Thank you.
You
as
too.
well.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.
Excellent.